I raced in an era where mistakes could kill you. Not end your season, not cost you a few points, kill you. That was the reality of Formula One in the late 1970s. Every corner carried weight, every decision mattered, and the margin between a good race and a catastrophe was thinner than most people will ever understand. I came into the sport later than most. No junior program, no family legacy, no clear path. I was an Australian who had to fight for every seat, every opportunity. My first win came at the Austrian Grand Prix in 1977, driving for Shadow, a small team with big ambitions and very little else. 3 years later, I became world champion with Williams. That was the peak. But here is the thing people rarely talk about. I was never the fastest driver on the grid, I knew that. And I made peace with it early on. When Formula One later asked me to reflect on my career, I told them the truth. The secret was not making mistakes. That was it. While others chased the last tenth of a second and ended up in the barriers, I finished races, I scored points, I stayed alive. Talent can take you far, but survival takes you further. Over the course of my career, I faced many drivers, but 5 of them stood apart, not because they beat me more than anyone else, but because each of them forced me to change, to adapt, to evolve. The first thing I had to learn was that my version of fast was not fast enough. James Hunt was not someone I battled wheel to wheel every weekend. By the time I started making my way toward the front of the grid, James was already the name that defined speed in Formula One. He had won the World Championship in 1976, and even in the years that followed, he remained the benchmark, the driver everyone measured themselves against when it came to raw pace. What made James dangerous was not just his qualifying speed, though that alone was extraordinary. It was the way he drove instinctive, aggressive, completely natural behind the wheel. He did not overthink. He simply went fast. And for someone like me, who built his entire career on discipline and consistency, that was a confrontation I could not ignore. There is no shame in admitting it. In a retrospective with Autosport, I acknowledge that James was one of the quickest drivers of his time. Everyone in the paddock knew it. The question was never whether James was fast, it was whether the rest of us could find a way to live with that kind of speed. For me, the answer meant changing. I could finish every race, score solid points, and still be considered among the best if I could not raise my absolute pace. James never sat me down and told me that, but his presence made the lesson unavoidable. Being reliable was not enough, not at that level. I raised my speed, but in 1978, someone showed me that speed without the right car meant nothing. 1978 belonged to Mario Andretti. There is no other way to describe it. He and the Lotus 79 did not just win races, they redefined what a Formula One car could be. Ground effect aerodynamics changed everything overnight, and Mario was the first driver to fully exploit that revolution. What made him so difficult to compete against was not simply the car. Plenty of drivers have had fast machinery and failed to deliver. Mario had the precision to extract every bit of performance from a concept that was still dangerous and unpredictable. The Lotus generated enormous downforce, but it also demanded absolute commitment through every corner. One moment of hesitation and the car would snap away from you. Mario never hesitated. The results spoke for themselves. I have been asked many times what it was like watching that season unfold from further down the grid. The honest answer is it was humbling. Speaking to Formula One years later, I reflected on that era and said that Andretti set the standard when ground effect cars arrived. That was not an exaggeration. He did not just adapt to a new concept, he owned it completely. And the gap he created forced every other driver and team to rethink their entire approach. My Williams was not capable of fighting at the front that year, but I could watch, I could learn, I studied how ground effect changed the relationship between driver and engineer. That understanding became the foundation for the Williams FW07, the car that would carry me to the championship. By 1980, I finally had the car, I had the speed, but the championship taught me something else, that the driver who finishes second every race can still beat you. Nelson Piquet was the quietest threat I ever faced. He never tried to intimidate you in the paddock. He never made dramatic overtakes just to prove a point. He simply appeared where he needed to be, when he needed to be there, and by the time you realised how dangerous he was, he had already taken points from you. The 1980 season was supposed to be my year, and it was. I had the Williams FW07, one of the best cars on the grid, and I was driving at the highest level of my career. But Piquet in the Brabham was always there. Not always winning, but always finishing, always present. He managed his tyres better than almost anyone, and his ability to read a race was remarkable for someone so young. I described it once in an interview with BBC Sport. Piquet was very calculating in the way he drove. That was exactly the problem. You could not rattle him. You could not force him into errors. He would sit behind you, conserve his tyres, wait for the moment you made one small mistake, and then he would be past you before you even understood what had happened. That forced me to find a level of composure I had never needed before. Every race became an exercise in patience, not just being fast, but being fast without ever losing control of my emotions. I won the title that year. But Piquet made sure I earned every single point of it. I thought the hardest fights were against other teams. I was wrong. The rivals I have talked about so far, Hunt, Andretti, Piquet, they were the enemy. You expected the fight, you prepared for it, but Carlos Reutemann was my teammate, and that is what made it so much worse. In 1981, we were both driving for Williams. I was the reigning world champion. The assumption, mine, the team's, everyone's, was that Carlos would support the campaign. That was how it worked. You had a number one and a number two, and the team functioned around that hierarchy. Carlos did not see it that way. The breaking point came at the Brazilian Grand Prix. The team gave the order, let me through. Carlos refused, he crossed the line first, and I finished behind him. Autosport reported at the time that I was furious after the race. That does not begin to cover it. It was not just about one position in one race. It was about trust, the kind of trust you need when you are fighting for a championship and the person in the other car is supposed to be on your side. What followed was a fracture that never healed. The rest of that season, I was not just racing against other teams, I was looking over my shoulder inside my own garage. Carlos had the consistency, the pace, and the cold willingness to put himself first. He nearly won the championship that year. And in many ways, he broke something in my season that I never fully repaired. And while I was fighting battles behind the garage door, a new generation was already at the gate. The first four rivals I have described each tested a different part of me, my speed, my understanding of technology, my composure, my trust. But Alain Prost did something none of them did. He made me realise that my time was running out. Prost arrived in Formula One at the turn of the decade, and from the very beginning something about him was different. He was not the fastest in a single lap, he was not the most aggressive wheel to wheel, but he was the most complete driver I had ever seen. Smooth, patient, utterly precise. He drove as if he had calculated every corner of every race before the lights even went out. There was a reason the media and the paddock called him the Professor. BBC Sport and every major publication used that name because it captured exactly what Prost represented. A new philosophy of racing built on intelligence rather than instinct, tyre management, fuel strategy, knowing when to push and when to wait. Everything I had learned through years of hard experience, Prost seemed to understand naturally from the start. That was the moment I understood. Formula One was shifting. The era of drivers who survived on grit and aggression was giving way to a generation that treated racing as science. I looked at Prost and saw the future, and I was honest enough to recognise that it was a future built for someone else. That is when I knew Formula One had moved on, and honestly, so had I. When I look back now, I do not think about championships or trophies first. I think about the people who forced me to become better than I thought I could be. Hunt taught me that consistency without speed is invisibility. You can finish every race, but if you are never at the front, no one remembers your name. Andretti showed me that the sport does not wait for you. Technology moves forward, whether you understand it or not, and the drivers who refuse to evolve get left behind. Piquet proved that intelligence on a Sunday afternoon is worth more than bravery on a Saturday qualifying lap. And Reutemann Carlos taught me the hardest lesson of all, that the most dangerous rival is not the one on the other side of the grid. It is the one who shares your garage and does not share your loyalty. Then came Prost, and Prost did not teach me how to be better. He taught me that being better was no longer enough. Those are the two layers of this story. The first three rivals made me a champion. They gave me the speed, the knowledge and the discipline I needed to win. The last two showed me where the limits were, not the limits of the car or the circuit, but the limits of my own era. People ask me what it takes to survive in Formula One. My answer has not changed. It takes the willingness to learn from every single person who tries to beat you. They did not just race me. They forced me to evolve